For us at Perlego, we think of AI for our user base, which is more external, and then internal to drive optimizations. So the use of AI internally is, can we do things more efficiently, more cheaply, and more quickly in the way we build products, the way we serve customer support. There's so many efficiencies today that we already deliver that is great for company building. In short, it's cheaper to build companies today, and AI helps a lot from that perspective. So I believe it's about finding a sustainable model where essentially, if you think about Perlego, we're more efficient in the distribution channel, right? By selling digitally an ebook, you can sell to millions of students. You don't have print distribution costs, paper costs. You remove a lot of the cost out of the business. And for publishers, you can sell to millions of users and build a recurring revenue line.
Hello everyone, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Cur8 Founder Spotlight series. Today we have Gauthier with us, who is the founder of Perlego, which is the Spotify for textbooks. Welcome Gauthier, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Amazing. So guys, in this podcast, we're going to start off with Gauthier's journey, early childhood, university, the journey with Perlego, and then talk about like edtech, the landscape, how it's going to evolve in the future, etc. So Gauthier, first thing first, childhood and upbringing. Where are you from? Where did you grow up, etc.?
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Belgium. It's a very complicated country because we have three different languages. We have French, German, and Flemish. And my family's from the Flemish side, so I speak Flemish. But I grew up in the French-speaking side in Brussels, so I had to learn French. And then when I was a child, we moved around a lot for my dad's job, so that's how I kind of learned English. I went to international schools and stuff. And then when I was kind of doing my postgrad, I moved to the UK full time. Whilst I was at university, I had a few little businesses. Like one of them was called Iconic Matter, and it was quite funny. It was basically advertising in free notebooks. You get a notebook, you could get a free notebook as a student, you'd have a banner at the bottom. We had like great clients like Uber, Red Bull, and they'd pay, quite a significant amount to do marketing to students. Yeah. Had a bit of money, sold that, and then this was actually my dissertation project at Cambridge. And then after Cambridge, I actually didn't manage to launch Perlego. It wasn't really working. I decided to work a bit, so I did a bit of a stint at the FT, didn't really enjoy that, and then decided to launch Perlego. It's about six and a half years ago now. Been doing it ever since.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah. And just to take a step back,
yes, sure.
In the upbringing, so you know Flemish,
yep.
You know Belgian, you know English,
yep.
French.
Yeah.
So how is it like you're moving around because of your father's job? And one of the things that we see with founders is that this is a common theme in like some founders, that moving around helps you later on when you kind of start up. Do you feel that is the case? Or like, did that help you in some way?
I think, so to be super candid, one of the biggest gifts I've been given in life is the language of English. I think doing business in English means you have such a bigger market, right? I was back in Belgium last week, and I noticed some of the founders, they weren't very proficient in English, and as a result, it sounds really rude what I'm going to say, but probably less likelihood of raising money in the US and the UK. So that's been super phenomenal for my own career. I think by moving around quite a lot, you become accustomed to different cultures. So I went to the school called the European School. It's a really interesting school. It's basically, it was founded in the 1950s, and it was every language would have their own section, and all the children would come together. So that meant like when I was playing volleyball with the school, I would have a Spanish guy, a French guy in my class, we'd all connect. And so that's helped me a lot as well as different cultures, even in business, the way Americans do business compared to English people is very different. So I think that's helped me a lot as well.
Amazing. And what about like these early entrepreneurial ventures, the one you talked about? How do these play a role later on when you started Perlego?
So the first real venture, Iconic Matter, that was kind of a print-driven product, and I realized it wasn't very scalable, right? I'd have to get advertising, call up advertisers, we'd have to distribute the prints. So I learned that wasn't scalable, but I made a success from that. So instead of doing summer jobs, I would literally work for a month, I'd get an office, get a few interns, and we'd call up advertisers and get it all done in 6 to 8 weeks. So that kind of gave me the confidence to do my own venture. When I was at university as well, really silly, I went to an international university in Italy, and it was quite a prestigious university, and they didn't have hoodies. And I thought, okay, like, you know, when you go to Harvard or Cambridge, everyone's wearing their hoodie, and this university didn't have it. So the first year I created, I mean, it was really silly. I think I created 300 hoodies. And people were making fun of me like I was, you know, a carpet salesman, like selling hoodies and stuff. By year 3, I think I had 3 buddies working with me, and we sold like thousands of hoodies. And that made us a bit of money. And so I've always had a bit of a knack for it. But with Perlego, I think the difference is it's truly scalable, and it's a huge problem. I think, again, one of the challenges I see from a lot of founders today is they're building small, cute businesses, but at the end of the day, they're not VC-backable businesses or multi-billion-dollar companies.
Amazing.
Whilst Perlego could be.
So Gauthier, now moving on to Perlego.
Yeah.
Tell me about like where did the idea come from? How did it start? Early days? Any context around the starting of Perlego?
Sure. So I think first things first, Perlego means the verb to read in Latin. I read, I scan over. And funny anecdote, that name was actually founded. Well, the name, we were struggling for names with my co-founder, Matt Davis, who's a school friend from mine. And he's the CTO, he's more technical, whilst more the business guy. And Matt's father was like, hey, this could be a great name. And then we found the .com was available for something like, at the time, £3,000. We got the domain, that was a great name. I was gonna call it like Bookotopia or something ridiculous. So that was quite cool. So really where it all came about was when I was at university, my undergrad degree, I'd spend like quite a lot of money on textbooks, and I'd only read like 2-3 chapters of the book. And I was like, this is so annoying. I have all these heavy textbooks with me. I'd have like 9 books. And I was looking around and I saw that all my friends, they would download music illegally. They would download PDFs of these textbooks, or a lot of people would take them from the libraries, or they would do photocopies, right? And I thought, okay, surely a subscription model for books should exist. I looked in the market, nothing really existed. I started to get interested. I was really interested in the rise of subscription economies. So for context, from 2012 to today, the subscription, you subscribe to everything, right? Yeah. You can almost subscribe to, I'm making this up, but you can even subscribe to footwear brands and stuff now. Yeah. And you know when you smell something, you're like, this is weird, I need to look into it. I started to do some digging, I asked around, and I thought, okay, surely someone's tried to do this before, right? And then I heard that someone had tried to do this in 2007, but it was too early. And kind of to my benefit, I think on the student side, very expensive books, they just want to access the content, they don't want to own the content anymore. But on the publisher side, what was also really interesting is I spoke to 1 or 2 publishers, like pretending I was like, you know, a young student researching the market. And the publisher was like, hey, we're losing a huge amount of money from print, like students just buy secondhand print books. And then the thing that's been really rising for them in the last 5-6 years is piracy. So you have all these websites like Sci-Hub, LibGen, where you just download all the content illegally. So on the student side, massive problem. On the publisher side, massive problem for all the publishers because they're losing money to piracy and secondhand book markets. And you know, I was thinking, okay, if one publisher is doing badly, that's bad management. But if the whole industry is suffering, this is an opportunity to do some disruption, and then started to build Perlego.
Amazing.
Yeah.
2 follow-ups on that.
Yes.
So the first one is, why are textbooks so expensive? Like why are they so expensive in the first place?
Yeah.
And second, like so much of what you said is similar to, you know, what's happened in the movie business. Like we used to go to a video store, now we don't own the video. I used to love that. That was such a vibe. That was so fun. We don't own any movies, right? Any cassettes now, or CDs. We just own like the Netflix subscription. Yeah. So first one, why is textbooks expensive, and what's the parallel? Do you see any parallels between what's happening? I see loads of analogies. So to kind of unpackage that, let's talk about the first question, which is, this dynamic is very similar to the pharmaceutical industry. As a student, you're forced to read the textbook. So Halal Investing for Beginners, if that's on the reading list, you're forced to read it, right? To pass your exams. So that's already a dynamic you have to take into account, that the student is forced and has no replacement to that product. The reason these books have been spiraling, first of all, education as a whole has increased massively since the 1980s, 4 times the rate of inflation. Textbooks is a subcomponent of that. But for textbooks specifically, what would happen is
the publishers would release the first edition. Yeah, they would sell 100,000 copies. In the second year, they'd only sell 30,000 copies because all the students are buying secondhand editions. And by the third year, they only sell 10,000 new copies. So what they would do is make a few changes. They would increase the price and release the second edition. And then it would spiral. And you'd see that edition 17 was worth so much. And then I think over the last years, it's now decreased because we're seeing changes in the distribution model, more digital, etc. But if you think about it, a print book is also quite expensive to produce, to run. So those are generally the dynamics, was this new edition, due to cannibalization in print.
Amazing. And what about the analogies? Like, how do you see this similar to like the movie business or even the music business? Perlego is like Spotify for textbooks, right? So like this probably happened with the music industry, like piracy.
Yeah. So it's funny because the press sometimes says Netflix or Spotify, depending on which one. They both work for us. I think Spotify have done the hard work for us in terms of validating that an aggregator of subscription services makes sense. And Spotify brought the industry back to growth. Streaming has brought the music industry back to growth whilst it was in massive decline. So I think an analogy we could use is piracy was huge in the music industry, is huge in this industry, and there are very much similarities there. So if I was to think about the music industry today, we're at 2008 of the music industry in the publishing industry. Higher education business is an all-time low. The different component here is secondhand in print. You would have a few secondhand CD records, but it wasn't a big market.
Yeah.
And secondhand on DVDs, also not a massive market. So secondhand is something which is different to both of those industries. On the movie industry, I think it's less similar to the music industry. And the reason being is education sometimes is seen as a necessity, not a luxury. It's still a luxury in many worlds, right? But if you're forced to read your book, you're forced to read your book. If you're forced to read, you're never forced to watch a movie. And if you're missing one or two of those movies, it's not the end of the world, right? I'm sure you saw Netflix now. They've removed a bit of content. Disney, we've seen like Disney Plus, Netflix is kind of getting split up now. Whilst in the kind of textbook industry, no publisher has enough market share. So even the biggest publishers, you might use one textbook for your undergrad's, STEM textbook, but then in your second and third year, you'll use different textbooks. So aggregation makes much more sense here because you're not just going to subscribe to one product, right?
And in this, so if I were to sort of understand Perlego, it kind of acts like an aggregator like Spotify.
Yep.
You have the publishers on one side, you have the users on one side, and then you have these marketplace dynamics that kick in, right?
Yep.
Like the chicken and egg problem.
Yes.
I go to Netflix because there's a huge content of library over there, or like Spotify has a lot of podcasts that I could offer. So building these marketplaces, especially at the start, who are the early adopters for Perlego? How did you sort of, scale this? What's the situation now? Like how many users you have, publishers, etc.?
Sure. So in the beginning, it was so tough. Yeah. 26, come out of uni. I have no idea what an EPUB or ePDF. They're throwing all these terminologies. And I'm so grateful to the first investors because on paper, never built a big scale up. Young guy coming out of university has no idea what he's doing. The publishers, no publishing experience, right? Had no experience. But what I would do is I started with the long tail, the smaller publishers, publishers that would have 30, 40, 50 books. And I'm so grateful to these people. I would go to London Book Fair, which is a massive book fair. And I just had loads and loads of meetings. And they'd see this kid come up and they'd be like, and I'd have not even a product. I'd just have hey, this is my idea. What do you think? And I'd hear their problems and they'd be like, yeah, if you could help us on piracy, that would be a good thing. So the first 6 months was me and Matt just talking to publishers. Matt was coding away. When I should show you the first version of the product, it was so ugly. I think my mum just subscribed for pity. But the first I'd say year was validating the supply side. Could we bring on publishers? And I think the first year we got on about 100,000 books, but long tail publishers. And as you said, chicken and the egg, right? You get more supply, you get more users. Then you start to build a bit of a growth funnel. So SEO is a big channel for us and that started to pick up. And the more users you bring on board, the easier it would get to get publishers. So now we have hundreds of thousands of users globally. We have users in 191 countries, which is very cool. And in terms of publishers, we have about 9,200 publishers in 7 different languages. Wow. So really made good progress from that perspective. And we get to talk maybe about the vision of what's next for Perlego, but now we have the content layer, it's building all these cool study layers and other dynamics on top.
Amazing. One thing that you mentioned that caught my eye, 191 countries.
Yeah.
So you see, like when you build a business here, especially out of the UK,
Yeah.
the biggest question is, when do I go to the US?
Yeah.
How come like 7 years into the journey, you're at 191 countries? And is it like important for a product like yours to be in other places in the world? Or in terms of like markets, which one are the most important one to you?
Yeah, so we'll probably maybe talk about some of the mistakes of company building in the last 5-6 years, but my biggest regret is that we didn't go internationally faster. The first 3-4 years, we're like, we've got to crack the UK, it's all about the UK. We should have just opened up straight away, and we would have probably been further in our revenue trajectory than we are today. The reason Perlego is a global product is I think the dynamics of textbook publishing are quite global. What's interesting is even in France now, a lot of students are studying in English. And the most important thing is our growth channel, which is SEO. People find us organically. So I wish we had opened up earlier. There are complexities involved, right? But we, for example, on our consumer business, we use Stripe, and Stripe allows us to open up to a lot of countries. For context, 60% of all of our revenue is coming from North America already right now. So
yeah,
and also it's a much bigger dynamic. Rest of world is about 20%, and then UK and Europe is the rest.
Amazing. And how important is like, when you say like, there were some problems, some challenges when you internationalize, how important is like the cultural nuances, the localization, the different languages? Like how many languages, is it Perlego only English, or like, is it other languages also?
Maybe to explain, until last year, we were only available in English. 2 years ago, we hired local regional leads, and the way we think about the markets is based on languages. So French is a huge market for us because we get North Africa. Spain is huge for us because we get Europe and Latin America, some of it. And so what we got is we got people to start onboarding the content in local languages, but we didn't translate the platform yet. And then last year we translated Perlego, we localized it, we bought the .es, .fr, and when you now go on Perlego in France, it's in French, and the French content comes to the forefront. The biggest impact that's had is on our conversion rate. Conversion is much, much higher, and you see localized languages have a much bigger uptick. So before, people in France, they found us through English channels. Now they read the French content, and so the local mix is much, much higher.
Amazing. And in terms of like, this just occurred to me, like these 191 countries. So you see over here in the UK or the US, people still have a relative level of affordability for these textbooks, right?
Yeah.
That's not the case in like so many places in Africa, in Asia, or lots of places in the world.
Yeah.
So how is this subscription thing solving for that lack of affordability when it comes to giving those people access to textbooks they otherwise wouldn't be able to afford?
Yeah, so I just want to bring it back to our mission, which is we want to make educational content affordable for all, right? And if we think about our stakeholders, we have 3 main stakeholders: publishers, users, and then we have quite a big university business where universities are buying Perlego. Now, if we think about our mission, what's interesting is in markets like some parts of Africa, to some extent India, the dynamics of textbook publishing in print don't make sense. So specifically, we talk to publishers and they're like, yeah, in India it's 100% piracy, so take that market. We're not making any money, you might as well try. So what's interesting is there with our publishers, we've asked something called regional pricing, which means we can pay less royalties or more affordable royalties, which means we can make the price more affordable. So what we've done is kind of a nerdy thing. One of my colleagues, Olivier, did this. He built what's called a textbook index, very similar to the Big Mac index. You look at the student population, you look at the propensity to pay, you look at the average price of textbooks, and then your prices vary in different markets. So in the US, on average, a student spends $1,200 on books. In India, it's much, much less. So in India, we're 399 rupees. In the US, we're $18 a month, right? So you play out different markets. But what's interesting is our US users convert higher, even though the price is higher. So that's kind of how we think about it, local and regional pricing with publishers to make it also affordable.
Amazing. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Like when you use like Netflix over there, and like I'm from Pakistan, there's a different subscription price. Spotify, same thing, different subscription price, as compared to here in the UK.
I was thinking around advertising, and that's not going to work for us because you don't want the negative perception for our publishers' premium content with advertising. But that would have been a great way where you could say, hey, watch 3-4 adverts and get an hour free of reading. That's not going to work for us, I'm afraid.
And one other thing, like which you also touched upon, like right in the beginning, and that's happened with me in university also, is that you have all these textbooks with like 20 chapters.
Yeah.
Like you said, you read 2, and then that textbook sits with you for the rest of your life.
It looks good on your shelf, and you look very like clever on your Zoom calls. Like, I
read all those. Yeah. But in reality, like if I were to read only a few chapters, it just makes sense that I pay for those chapters, right? Like or like if I'm streaming those chapters online, I pay for them as opposed to buying that entire book. So how have you seen like users doing more of that, or the behavior is that they just outright buy the textbook and just choose to stream it online?
Yeah, so you know how in the music industry you probably listen to a specific song and not a whole album anymore?
Yeah.
It's exactly the same thing in this industry. Now, the problem is publishers are like, no, you've got to buy the whole book. The book is the book. But because we're a streaming service, we collate all the data and consumption trends, right? And so we see that, we share this back with our publishers, it's all anonymized, but you can see that chapter 3, 4, and 5 is being read a lot, and chapter 1 and chapter 12 is never being read. So I believe the future, and I see this we have this cool functionality called Workspace. Workspace allows you to create homework on Perlego and allows professors to assign specific chapters in the book. What I'm seeing as a trend is students are no longer reading textbooks, right? Just talking textbooks, a textbook from A to Z. They read 1 or 2 chapters here from one book, 2 chapters from another book. And so you're seeing much more fragmentation where consumption of content is across a chapter level and not a book level anymore. So you take the best chapters from each book, which makes sense for a subscription model because we pay publishers back on consumption, so they're still happy, right? Because they always get paid, but it also helps for the user because they can now dip into lots of different content.
Does it also help like the publishers or the authors because they get an insight into what's being read, what's not being read?
Yes, so one of the things, the editorial decisions at publishing houses, they love this data. They're like, wow, in our traditional models when we'd sell on Amazon, we'd only see a sale. But because we stream page per page, they can see everything, right? They can see the most highlighted parts of books. It's amazing. They love that. They love that more than anything else we give them. Now, do editors send that back to the authors? I'm not sure yet. We would like one day potentially to allow authors to have a community on Perlego where they could talk to their community. Today, I don't know how authors use it, but I think authors are starting to use that information, which is shared from their publishers. But for publishers, it's incredible, right? They can be like, wow, we can see that chapter 1 is never being read. We have to rewrite that chapter.
Amazing. It kind of like gives rise to a dynamic publishing of sorts. Like you get like some real-time feedback as an author that, okay, I'm like the next edition that I'm going to come up with, I might do away with this chapter, replace it with something else. Like bringing a whole new game of experimentation into this.
Yeah. Why is that? Is it because the student has learned to nail down the requirement when it comes to exams or certain tests? Why are they doing that? Before it was to be read the whole book and then take a test for an exam. Why is that now?
I think it's due to the fact that professors are assigning specific homework for specific students. So they say chapter 2 is introduction to corporate finance. Chapter 4 is investing in EdTech.
Yeah.
So they're much more affirmative on the assignments of the content.
Yeah.
And we'll maybe be able to talk about the new products we've launched, AI Research or Smart Search. Again, what's so interesting with Smart Search is you can ask any question and we will pull the answers from all the passages of the book and bring the most relevant passages out of the book.
Amazing.
So that's driving more consumption straight to the part of the book which is relevant to you.
And this is sort of like, this brings me to my next question, which is like the elephant in the room, AI.
Yes,
like,
yes, it is everywhere.
It is everywhere. And this is a space that, I feel that education is a space that's going to have a very big impact on. So just want to get your views on like, how do you see this space evolving with AI? Second, how do you see these publishers managing to hold on to their intellectual property in an age where LLMs are just consuming every content out there, and there's no way for them to assert that, okay, this is my content, I need to be paid for it.
Yeah. So on the AI question, I'll talk about Perlego and then we'll talk about the IP with publishers. So for AI, I think AI it's all around us, it's happening. There's a lot of hype, probably in some of the deals you've been seeing in investing. Everyone has an AI strategy right now, but the real fundamental difference in AI are some things like game changing, or are some things just a little sprinkle of AI on top. For us at Perlego, we think of AI for our user base, which is more external, and then internal to drive optimizations. So the use of AI internally is, can we do things more efficiently, more cheaply, and more quickly in the way we build products, the way we serve customer support. There's so many efficiencies today that we already deliver that is great for company building. In short, it's cheaper to build companies today, and AI helps a lot from that perspective. A really good example is text-to-speech. You can now listen to all the books on Perlego, and we use an AI voice that cites every book. Amazing. So publishers no longer have to create their audiobooks. Especially in textbook publishing, it's a big thing. Now, on the publisher front, it's a huge challenge, and all the publishers are really, really nervous, right? And you've seen some massive lawsuits from newspaper publishers against OpenAI. You've probably seen some of deals are getting signed. The Financial Times did a deal. I think publishers are realizing that this is going to become a revenue line as part of their revenue mix. And most likely is they are going to want query or micropayments on a tokenized basis. And I think the big players like Mistral, OpenAI, they want to find a sustainable model for all parties to be involved. And very similar to, I'm sure you know how Google, with Google News, they would pay micro snippets and then they'd send traffic back to the main platforms. I think we're going to see more of that. For us at Perlego, we always pay our publishers no matter how we use the content. But what's really important is we're not allowed to use it to train LLM models. So we can use it to deliver content, to surface content, to build our own co-pilots on the content, but we're not allowed to send that content to OpenAI or other providers to train. And I think you're seeing, it's scary for the publishers because a lot of them are starting to do 1 or 2 deals, like 10 million a year to train the content. But once you've done that once, there's no more value in that content because people are going to use it through the chatbots, etc. So it's a very difficult industry to navigate right now. I'm more positive around it than scared about it. I always believe premium quality content will exist, and we have to accept it.
And would Perlego be like a good middle ground in this? Like, for example, there is OpenAI, there is Wiley. For example, there are 2 publishers, right?
Yep.
Like, Wiley can directly go sign a deal with OpenAI. Like, a lot of deals have been signed. Like, Reddit has done a deal.
Reddit did a deal for 60 million. Interestingly, Sam Altman is an investor in Reddit.
In Reddit, yeah. So now basically, like, all the money, all the data is being consumed by the model, but once it's consumed, it uses its utility. Like, it's no longer new, it's no longer proprietary, right?
Yeah.
But Perlego is like kind of this bridge in the middle, like, okay, AI capabilities from OpenAI, publisher trust here, Perlego sits in the middle, Chinese wall of sorts, if I would call it.
I think what's interesting, and you're right, and this is something I'm exploring, is we have the dynamic of we pay publishers on a query basis or royalty basis for every single word or page read on the platform, and that's incredibly valuable. At the same time, OpenAI is trying to see, is there a model where we can work with all these publishers, but we also pay them for the content? And something we're thinking of is today we're building a lot of AI products for our users and for our community, and we've been inspired by other companies like Perplexity AI, and we think we can do some really cool things around that, which we'll share in September. But yes, do you think Perlego could become an in-between where you could license content, etc.? These are things our strategy, Olivier, who leads our strategy team, is kind of thinking about, and I think is very exciting. I think coming back to a point you said earlier, education is the industry that's going to be disrupted the most around AI. I can guarantee you. If we think about industries which are not very digital yet, education, only 4% of it is digital. Now, if we think about all the problems in education, teachers don't have a lot of time. It's expensive. Imagine if you could help teachers with their learning assessments or their learning assignments, drive 20-30% efficiency. They have more time to teach students. Students all learn differently. I had people at my class, they've learned super quickly. I might learn slower. Well, you can now through AI provide personalization in your learning outcomes. These are all super powerful things which will be game changers in the industry. It's at its infancy, but I'm very bullish of where we'll come out in the next 3-4 years.
Amazing.
And I think just to finalize, what we have is a ton of content, a ton of users, and we can leverage that to build cool products and leverage the latest technology, as you've seen with some of the things I showed you a few weeks ago. That's pretty exciting.
Good. And then there's like this movement of, open resource movement of sorts.
Yeah.
Like, like these resources should be like public.
Yeah.
And then there is your model in which, there's a small subscription, you ensure the quality is like top notch. And then there is the other end of the spectrum, which is like, I heard like Wiley did a deal, or like Pearson did a deal in which they converted their stuff to NFTs, and they were planning to monetize it like no matter how long you use it. So that's at one end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
There's the free end, and there's this Perlego middle subscription economy. What's your view on that space?
So the two spectrums. On the NFT thing, that was just a good press story. Nothing's come out of it. And if you look anywhere, no one can find anything. And I think that was the former CEO who's now left, just wanted an exciting story in the Times. And everyone in the industry is like, it's funny and jokey, but nothing's come from that. On the other side of the spectrum, everyone was like open access, OER, which is growing. There's a very good one called OpenStax, which Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation invests 20 million in. And that's great. They have 22 textbooks that they give for free, and it's working quite well. The challenge is quality in OER is not there, because if you don't pay for it, if it's for free, you pay what you get, right? And that's not good for learning. The challenge on this whole NFT thing, that's a bit too far flung, and publishers don't really believe in that. And so I believe it's about finding a sustainable model where essentially, if you think about Perlego, we're more efficient in the distribution channel, right? By selling digitally an ebook, you can sell to millions of students. You don't have print, distribution costs, paper costs. You remove a lot of the cost out of the business. And for publishers, you can sell to millions of users and build a recurring revenue line. So win-win for the students, cheaper. Win-win for the publishers. They continue to monetize and have sustainable businesses that they can pay their authors, pay their, their stakeholders. What you don't want is to go this side or this side, because then there will be a lot of value creation lost either on the spectrum. So Perlego, in my view, is nicely in the middle. Yes, if you want a cheap, affordable solution, we are available. But also if you want the premium quality content, we're also helping the best publishers monetize their content.
Got it. Now, so I'm going to take like a different trajectory and talk about like fundraising a bit.
Okay.
So you have been like fundraising, venture markets for EdTech, etc. So you've raised how much like over the course of Perlego over these last 6-7 years?
I think now we're going to be at about just shy of $90 million.
Amazing.
Yeah.
What's your like tips to any founders out there or anyone starting up on like fundraising in different rounds stages? Like,
first of all, I really want to stress it is super hard, right? If I think there's been a glamorization in the press lately around fundraising, which you see loads of deals and it's tough. I think a few things that I've learned. I learn really well, and I get on really well with people who've built businesses or building their own businesses or doing their own things, a bit like you guys here, because you've seen the suffering of building a company, or the suffering of, we were talking about building the community. It takes time. It takes a lot of grafting and hard work. And I really enjoy people who have seen and failed before, and I can learn from their failures, because a startup, I guarantee you, it's just failing very fast and learning from your mistakes. So number one is I really, in my first round, I learned so much from angel investors, Simon Franks, Alex Chesterman. These are people who, they saw this guy and they thought, you know what, we'll back him. And thanks to SCIS and EIS, it made it attractive financially for them as well. And these guys have done super well on the back of their Perlego investment, right? But at the beginning, it was a very risky bet. So the first round is probably, they call it friends, fools, and family, which I think is true. And thanks to the UK, one of the best things we have here is SCIS and EIS, which takes a huge amount of burden off the financial risk of investing, as you guys probably know. Once you raise kind of let's call it a kind of Series A round, you already have a bit of traction, you have a bit of metrics, but it's still about the strong vision and where you're going. And you need to show initial proof points or data points that what you're doing is working. But I see founders now raising a Series A round who say they're going to be profitable and stuff. That's not, if you're a venture-backed business, don't worry about that. The stage we're at now, we've raised quite a bit of money. We are later in we're 7 years into our cycle. You have revenue, you have business, it's working. You've shown that some markets are profitable. and it's about building a huge scalable engine which can become truly global, right? And if I think about the different risk elements, the first element is so risky. This is so risky. The terms, the valuation is low. You're basically investing into people. It's just into the founders and their vision. Series A, you've de-risked already a bit of the concept creation, but it's still very high risk. And where we're at now, Series B and plus, it's working, it's almost profitable. If it's well capitalized, you know there's a path to exit one way or the other, either through strategics or IPO, whatever it may be. But I think I don't know if you know this, if you read in the press, it's about 12 years to exit on average. So the important thing if you're an angel investor or investing early stage in a company is patience is also quite important. It takes 5, 6, 7 years for things to compound and grow. When I was building Perlego 6 years ago, would I have imagined I'm here? It would have been my wildest dreams. I would have never believed we'd have hundreds of thousands of users. So I think there's this famous quote, never underestimate what you can do in 10 years, but overestimate what you can do in a year. Yeah. And that is so true. And what's interesting is things compound, right? Once you hit scale 30, 40 million of revenue, to add an additional 1 million of revenue, it goes quick.
It's like you got a lot of levers you can put.
But in the seed time to make a million, it's like, it takes ages, it's like a dream. Amazing. So hopefully that gives a bit of color of how I think about it. And why the UK is an amazing ecosystem still.
So that leads to two questions. One thing that you talked about, how is London, UK, especially for building companies? And the second one is, I'll get to the second one. First, this one, how is UK London for building a company?
So look, I tried to raise money in Belgium. I didn't manage. I came here. I managed in 10 weeks, right? And there are two elements. Is the taxation element, which is very attractive and well done to the government at the time for creating SEIS and EIS. Then the second element is you have a huge network of entrepreneurs who reinvest into the ecosystem. And that is super important because you learn from other entrepreneurs, they've successfully exited and they recycle money into the industry. Then finally, you do have a lot of capital from America and US funds are based here. So I would say it is the financial capital of Europe for raising capital, VC-backed businesses. And then around you have a lot of private equity and a lot of that, but that's not really of interest. It's early stage, a good ecosystem.
What about talent, as compared to other places in Europe?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the honest matter is you have great talent in the UK. Everyone who comes to the UK is smart, hungry, wants to stay here for 5, 10 years. We would talk about this, London specifically. The challenge we have is not a lot of UK talent has scaled businesses globally. So in the US, you have people who have built Stripe from 0 to billions, right? The challenge we have in the UK and Europe is we tend to sell our businesses around 200-300 million of shareholder value because we go, a big American player is going to buy it for us. So we need to get better at getting later stage, building global companies. Revolut is a good example of that, but where we can conquer the world and where we don't sell to the US too early on.
Amazing. And this brings me to the question on exits.
Yes.
So the edtech landscape is characterized by lack of exits.
Yes. So something everyone's on my back for.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that? Why is that so? And how do you see that space changing? Especially now that this space is disrupted very bad.
I think it's an accumulation of three things. One, there was very little capital available in edtech. When I started edtech, everyone was like, this is so boring. Edtech isn't sexy. It became sexy in COVID and now it's not sexy again. The reason it's less sexy is if we look at public comps, companies like Chegg or Baiju's, they've hurt the industry as a whole. But number one, a lack of capital to go the whole way. The second is, we touched on it before, lack of talent. And this is really rude what I'm going to say, but I think I've got to be honest about it, is edtech used to be former teachers or professors who had a great idea, quite conceptual, but not very business driven in the execution. There was an element of edtech has to make it more affordable for free and not make commercial sense. So I think there was a lack of talent. So the final point I wanted to say is faculty, publishers, some of the biggest stakeholders in this industry, and universities, they're way more pro-digital than they were 5, 10 years ago. And I think COVID has helped us massively there. Before, when we speak to professors, they'd be like, yeah, but I don't like the digital books. I like the good old-fashioned print book. Or you speak to universities and say, no, we don't need an online learning tool for our students. Because of COVID, everyone now has an appetite and an acceptance of digital learning in their mix. And so we've seen, when we started Perlego, 3.2% of this $1 trillion industry was digital. Now it's already 4.5%. It's becoming more and more digital as we move forward. So the industry's going in the right way, and I think what you're going to see is you saw the first edtechs, Chegg, Byju's, they came out 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago, and now the second layer of edtechs, you know, Multiverse, Perlego, we're coming to the forefront, and I think we're building scalable global companies, and you should see those guys come to public markets in the next 4 or 5 years.
And on that side note, like we talked about physical books. Do
Yes.
you read like any physical books?
I do.
Yeah?
I got to tell you, like, imagine you're on holiday and you're at the beach or something. You want to read a paper book, right?
Yeah.
The difference is that's more of a fiction book, or it's a book you'll read completely.
Yeah.
When it comes to Perlego, we have great non-fiction, professional. We have all that type of content, but you're going to read specific chapters. So I still believe in print, but print is a luxury product. And for trade, those £12 books, you know, the ones you buy in WH Smith, I think that will always exist. Do you still read in print?
Yeah, I do. Like the sort of books that you mentioned. And on that note, what's your favorite book?
My favorite book of all time is Shoe Dog. It's the founding story of Nike.
Nice.
And it is so motivating because the founder went through so many trials and tribulations, so many tough times. And he gives you a bit of a motivation around. Have you read it?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a great book. It's just like, what a great company, but wow, it almost died out. You know, there are these lawsuits and stuff. It just shows you that company building is a massive roller coaster.
And you know, like it's the favorite book of a lot of founders I talk to.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so you're like the fourth founder who's told me that's their favorite book.
I love that book. I like The Subtle Art of Not Giving that one.
Yeah, okay.
That's another one. But yeah, that really is my favorite book.
So now I got here on to like the personal journey.
Yes.
So you get out of college,
Yep.
start Perlego as a young kid.
Yep.
You now manage how many people?
About 120 in the company.
120.
Yeah.
How's that journey been from like 0 users to hundreds and thousands of users, millions in revenue, 125 employees? Yeah. What are some of the skills that you think are like table stakes in this journey? And how have you grown over the years?
Yeah. So the early days, it's so much fun. It's 5 buddies, no idea what you're doing. It's very quick. Products come to the market in a minute. You learn and you test. If I think today we're a big organization organized in different tribes. So we have 4 different tribes. We have data functions, finance functions. It's like a serious company. It's like proper, right? Like you have governance structures in place. So it's not the wild cowboys that we used to be, and it's much more like serious company now. I think the most important thing for me has been hiring good talent, and I've made a lot of mistakes on talent as well. To give you an example, we hired someone to lead our US expansion, and I got excited about all the big brands, you know, Amazon, the big publishing. I was like, amazing. And what I realized is it didn't work for us. And speaking to other founders, you probably need to hire, sounds a bit hungry hustlers who are willing to prove themselves, who haven't built a reputable career yet, who haven't had 25 years at Amazon, and who are willing to do the hard work and the grafting. Whilst when you buy someone with 25 years experience at a big corporate, it's very different to company building. So my biggest learning is people are the most important thing, but people who are hungry in terms of their career and hungry to work. There's nothing about shying away from hard work and putting in the hours. It's the most important thing. So yeah, I'd say people is the most important learning, and people change, right? I think I'm very good at the early stages, and I'm growing into getting better at the later stages. But my passion is building companies.
So on that point, people are super important.
Yeah.
Like one last question on culture.
Yes.
What are the values for Perlego? And at what point in the company did you sort of, institutionalize them? Like, is this stuff that you thought of on day one or further along in your journey?
Yeah, so we just had a natural, quite cool culture. Elements of our culture, for example, we have a beautiful office in central London, and we all eat lunch together. So no one eats lunch by themselves behind their desk, which I think is quite cool. We have like cultural pillars. We are leaders, we care, we are open, we learn. And these are kind of elements of the symbols we look into people. So we learn. I'll give an example. We have somebody who started as an intern and now leading our Europe Latin expansion. Or when we started, we had no experience, and now we're leading the company, some of the younger people in the company. So learning, being open, all those kind of elements are very important. I do struggle a bit with super honesty, with 100% remote, and I do believe an element of building a company is being next to people who become your friends and going through the trials and tribulations together. But it's about finding a balance where you get the best talent. And so I think a hybrid model where people are in 2-3 days a week is important, and then remote for the rest. But I believe culture fundamentally at Perlego is people who are smart, who are driven, who don't take themselves too seriously, who can take a joke and mess around, who are happy to go through the highs and the lows, and who generally, a lot of people are friends outside of work, which also creates a different dynamic, right? I think my own reflection is sometimes I haven't been fast to part ways with people who didn't scale with the company because they became great buddies. And so that's something you've got to balance out as well. But again, culture is the most important thing in a startup. That's all that matters.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Gauthier,
Pleasure.
for your time.
Lovely to
it was
be here.
amazing
Thank you.
to learn about EdTech, Perlego, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.